Neo comes from the Greek neos, meaning new. Neo has become a part of many English words. Some are easy to understand, for example, neo-Nazi. Some are less so. You might not immediately guess that neotropical means from the tropics of the New World, or that a neophyte is a newcomer. When William Ramsay discovered 4 new gases, he named them all using Greek roots that at first glance might sound slightly mysterious: argon, idle, krypton, hidden, xenon, strange, and neon, new. Neoclassic relating to a revival or adaptation of the styles of ancient Greece and Roman, especially in music, art, or architecture. He had always admired the paintings of the French neoclassical masters, especially Poussin and Ingres. In the arts and architecture, a style that has existed for a long time usually produces a reaction against it. So after the showy style of Europe's so-called Baroque era, from about 1600 to the early 1700s, the reaction came in the form of the neoclassical movement, bringing order, restraint, and simpler and more conservative structures, whether in plays, sonatas, sculptures, or public buildings. Its inspiration was the art of ancient Greece and Rome, that is, of classical antiquity. Why classical? In Latin classicus meant of the highest class, so in English classic and classical originally described the best ancient Greek and Latin literature, but soon came to mean simply of ancient Greek and Rome, since these were already seen as the highest and best cultures. Neoclassic generally describes artworks from the 1700s or early 1800s, by the painter David, the composer Mozart, the sculptor Canova, etc., but also works from the 20th century that seem to have been inspired by the ideals of Greece and Rome. Neolithic of or relating to the latest period of the Stone Age, when polished stone tools were used. Around the Mediterranean, the Neolithic period was a time of trade, of stock breeding, and of the first use of pottery. Since lithos in Greek means stone, the Neolithic period is the new or late period of the Stone Age, in contrast to the Paleolithic period, Old or Early period, see Palea, and the Mesolithic period, Middle period, of the Stone Age. The use of polished stone tools came to different parts of the world at different times, but the Neolithic age is usually said to begin around 9000 BC and to end around 3000 BC, when the Bronze Age begins. The Neolithic is the era when the farming of plants and animals begins, and when, as a result, humans first begin to create permanent settlements. Neoconservative: a conservative who favors strongly encouraging democracy and the U.S. national interest in world affairs, including through military means. Many believed that foreign policy in those years had fallen into the hands of the neoconservatives, and that the war in Iraq was one result. In the 1960s, several well-known socialist intellectuals, including Norman Podhoretz and Irving Kristol, alarmed by growing political extremism on the left, began to move in the other direction. Soon the term neoconservative, or neocon for short, was being attached to them. Rather than simply drifting toward the political center, Podhoretz and Kristol actually moved far to the right, especially on the issue of maintaining a strong military stance toward the rest of the world. The main magazine of neoconservatism became Podhoretz's Commentary. It was later joined by the Weekly Standard, edited by Kristol's son William. Not everyone agrees on how to define these terms. Still, it's clear that today you don't have to be a former liberal in order to be a neoconservative. Neonatal: of or relating to babies in the first month after their birth. The hospital's newest addition is a neonatal intensive care unit, and newborns in critical condition are already being sent there from considerable distances. Partly based on the Latin natus, born, neonatal means newly born. Neonatal babies themselves are called neonates. Most hospitals now offer neonatal screening, which is used to detect diseases that are treatable only if identified during the first days of life, and specialized neonatal nursing as well. But despite spending much money on neonatal care, the U.S. still ranks lower than some much less wealthy countries, such as the Czech Republic, Portugal, and Cuba, in infant mortality, infant deaths. NOV comes from the Latin word novus, meaning new. To renovate an old house is to make it new again, that is, put it back in tip-top shape. The long-running PBS show Nova keeps its large audience up to date on what's new in the world of science. And when the British king sent Scottish settlers to a large island off Canada's Atlantic coast in the 17th century, he named it Nova Scotia, or New Scotland. Novice, 1. One who has no previous training or experience in a specific field or activity, beginner. 2. A new member of a religious order who is preparing to become a nun or monk. It's hard to believe that a year ago she was a complete novice as a gardener who couldn't identify a cornstalk. Among the ancient Romans, a novice, novitius, was usually a newly imported slave who had to be trained in his or her duties. Among Catholics and Buddhists, if you desire to become a priest, monk, or nun, you must serve as a novice for a period of time, often a year, called your novitiate, before being ordained or fully professing your vows. No matter what kind of novice you are, at computers, at writing, at politics, etc., you've got a lot to learn. Novel, 1. New and not resembling something formerly known or used. 2. Original and striking, especially in conception or style. His techniques for dealing with these disturbed young people were novel, and they caught the attention of the Institute's director. If someone tells you that you've come up with a novel idea or a novel interpretation of something, it's probably a compliment. Not everyone is capable of original thinking. But not everything new is terribly worthwhile. A novelty, for example, is often a cute, or maybe just silly, little object that you might put on a display shelf in your house. It may seem surprising that the familiar noun novel is related as well. In the 14th century, Italian writers began writing collections of short tales, each of which they called a novella because it represented a new literary form. From this word, 3 centuries later, the English coined the noun novel. Innovation, 1. A new idea, device, or method. 2. The introduction of new ideas, devices, or methods. Smushing bits of candy into ice cream while the customer watched was just one of his innovations that later got copied by chains of ice cream outlets. Innovation is a word that's almost always connected with business. In business today, it's almost a rule that a company that doesn't innovate is destined for failure. The most important and successful businesses were usually started by innovators. And company managers should always at least listen to the innovative ideas of their employees.